Hackers.
I'll take the report as read. This is just an update. We had the first tranche, which was during lockdown, where we looked at ways that we could support the communities and businesses. The costs, as you can see, for what they have. In terms of support from businesses, a lot of it we triage through to central government because of the wage subsidy, and there was a lot of different assistance from government agencies. We had some very minimal inquiries around waiving of consent fees, and again we put that out for this sort of post-lockdown, and it's been a minimal uptake. You know, just a few inquiries. That's all. That's all. What we're doing is we've had forums with lots of different sectors just to get a feel of where they're at. So we did forums over lockdown, and we conducted a survey which went to about 1,000 businesses around the district, and that was in partnership with Tiwaka. And we published those survey results. At that time, there was a lot of businesses who were just wanting help around sort of HR sides of things, accounting, and sort of like the operational side. So we're doing another survey which launches this week, and that's to another 2,000 businesses around the district in partnership with Tiwaka, and we'll just get a trend to see how businesses are faring. As you're well aware, it's probably the tourism sector and the hospitality sector that are faring the worst at the moment, but they had a very good, anecdotally, July with the school holidays and the like. So that's very good, yeah. That's been heartening to hear. Just in terms of what we've got in the next sort of 6 months to 8 months, just with the support package, I just want to bring your attention to, as I say, we've got the business survey, and we'll be doing more of those surveys throughout the next sort of months. We have basically led this business and careers expo, which we partnered with the surrounding districts and the Hauraki Māori Trust Board, and that's actually on next week. We've got quite a lot of businesses from around the district who are coming to take a stand, and we've got a huge amount on from the education sector who are on board as well. And that's been really a good partnership with Manamana Piako and Hauraki, and we've got a good, you know, we're saying about up to 1,000 kids will go through that over the 2 days. I think as elected members, you've all been invited. You should have received an email, and we would encourage you, if you can come along, we'd like to see you and have your support. And the other thing I'd just like to bring your attention to is just with the magazine. We did have a discussion about the importance of the magazine this year, particularly post-COVID, and where the costs were. The advertising that we reconnected with the advertisers, because we've already signed up advertising before COVID. Everybody actually wanted to keep advertising, and we've actually had a lot more want to advertise. Our advertising spend, our advertising rates are quite high compared to other publications around the district, and also we do our audience is our absentee rate managers that goes into absentee rate players, letter boxes. So there's a big uptake. We've also had Manamana Piako and Hauraki have wanted to partner with us on the magazine as well, because they want to promote more of the local region. So that's been something that we've worked with them as well. So that's a partnership that's grown for this magazine as well this year. We've got the cost down to about $11,000 for the magazine this year.
Can you include engaging and liaising with the Hauraki or Hauraki Māori Trust Board in that as well, because we now have that really strong partnering relationship between the three councils of the Hauraki Māori Trust Board, and I think that's important to try and include with them as that partner in as much as we can. What we're doing. So if we could do that with a magazine.
Absolutely, and they've taken a stand at the Business Expo themselves. We have talked to them about content for the magazine, so we'll keep working on that as well.
Cool. All right, any other questions of Lorna?
Lorna, I've got a question on the COVID recoverable cost under claim, are you pretty sure we'll get all those back? What's the indications? Because I'm always scared when I see under claim that we're only going to get 50% of our claims or something.
I'll be going more with Donna on that respect because it's her team that have to recover those costs. But we see the emergency management and civil defence team. I mean, this is a contract that they have with the government to recoup those costs. It's a commitment that's made. I don't know, I'm pretty sure.
But we wouldn't have made that expenditure if it wasn't for that commitment for reimbursement.
Well,
because the expenditure was very carefully controlled by that undertaking.
Get it in quickly, they're going to run out of money.
My understanding of it is that yes, we will be reflected in the system, like they are processing all the claims at the moment. I don't think they get paid, they're collecting all the claims in from everyone before they make claims, but yeah, my understanding is that we were instructed by them to do this piece of work, so.
Yeah. And during the response time, there was a finance staff member in the emergency management office, so they were there to manage the costs and check when things were going to be signed off. So there was that oversight as well.
Sorry, I thought it was someone sitting on a whoopee cushion for a minute there.
You just come and do your draw.
That's all right. Thanks upstairs.
Brian's onto it.
Okay, so can I ask, when you're contacting all these businesses and getting an estimate of, an understanding of what's happening there, are you finding out from the businesses that they're still operating under the use of the subsidy from the government? Because if a lot still are within our district being, relying a bit on that subsidy, once it's withdrawn, are they still viable? I mean, that would be the concern that I would have. While they're doing really well now.
Absolutely, and that's the trend that we're looking for, is that at the moment everyone's fairly optimistic and buoyant because of the subsidy, and this is closing off in the next couple of weeks, so this is why we need to be, are they going to be able to retain staff after the subsidy?
Yeah.
So there are businesses that have already said that they won't be able to do that.
Right. Okay. Are there any further questions of order? There being none, do I have a mover? Kerry, seconder. Sally, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried.
A vote of thanks for them.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah. The work's magnificent, so, yeah, it's, I'm really pleased with the way that we're working with Highland very thankful too. They were so keen to come on board with the Careers Expo that, and the other two councils as well, which is pretty amazing. First big business expo in the Waikato, so we're pretty thrilled about that. And I have to say, it's a really excellent event. I'm really very impressed with all the work that everybody does to bring that together. So just like to pass on our thanks to all of those involved in clearing it. That's great.
And what, for me, the 3 to 6 on the first day, when schools will have gone back, and so for people that might have to retrain or rethink their career paths as a result of COVID, so it's not just for the rangatahi, it can be for other people who are reflecting on change. So get that out there, that you're welcome whether you're 25 or 45, because a lot of people are having to adjust their professions.
Absolutely, and there is a lot of support financially for anyone who's looking to retrain. So
yeah, so now's the time to get free training for another career if you're not happy in your
I
current
think I
one.
want to be a lawyer.
Are you looking at something?
Oh no, she Twilight.
And just to give you a bit of a heads up, there'll be a lot of politicians coming through. So, and we're just rolling out the red carpet for them. They can all get to say a few words. I'm not worried about that. That's, it just adds to the flavour and the excitement, if you like, of the event. So bring it on.
So I have some tough questions from the young people.
I don't think there'll be the question time. It's really, it is what it is. Okay, now Narumi and Thornton, but so thank you, Lord. I think that pretty much is it. I've got the resolution in mind. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. You right there, Gary?
Yeah, we haven't done 3.3 yet.
So we're on to 3.3.
Again, take this one as read, and you're aware of this project, which has been a long time in the making, about 18 to 24 months. But we're finally there with it. This again is a partnership with Crown Infrastructure Partners and Chorus. Crown Infrastructure Partners is heavily subsidises with 2/3 of the project cost. Again, this is what the community's been asking for. We've lobbied, the government's been lobbied, about 227 properties. So we looked at the costings, and what we've got is the amount that needs to be recovered from the property owners, which will be sending out letters to let them know of that effect. At the moment, the fibre is currently, it's being laid, or it's actually being laid at the moment. It's been laid. Now, see the work is going on, and the letters to go out from Chorus to the property owners are going out in August to say you can now connect up. That's the
Excellent, okay, thank you.
And the buy-in's been good?
the support.
Martin and John.
Been fantastic. So we've had 2 ratepayer separate groups that we've been connecting with directly, and they've been sharing with their communities, and we've been, everyone's very, very happy.
Martin and John.
So presumably, yeah, so the residents here have got an understanding that there's some money to be recovered.
Yes, they are. We made them aware of that ahead of the project, the actual delivery of it, that there was going to be some costs recovered.
I had Robert pick up any short.
John.
So if any of those property owners don't want to connect to fibre, and there probably will be a few elderly people and what have you, we are not going to invoice those properties.
Yes, we are.
We are
It's a
still
fine.
going to invoice them.
Yes, we are.
And yeah, is that
That's what the resolution says.
oh yeah, we're going to invoice them.
Yeah, so this is.
But my point is, we're going to invoice them, but if they choose not to pick up the fibre, don't pay the invoice, well, how does that go down?
It can be a lien against property.
Even though they're getting us, okay.
So right back at the start, this came from the community. They were trying to run innovative businesses, etc., out there and taking an hour to download a map. And so they couldn't function. And so this was our best way of assisting them. And they have the potential access so they can join up or not, but they still have to pay that.
I understand how that works with water and sewage, the options outside the property connect, even if you don't technically still got to pay for the service being there. I mean, this is worthwhile, this is what's happened there. I'm just wondering about how many are actually going to.
Well, that's what Lorna's saying. They've been working with the community, and do you ever get 100%?
No, you
No,
won't.
but from what we've sent out, we've not had anyone come to us yet to say, I'm not going to pay that bill.
Yeah.
And we've been working with those communities for the last month.
Yeah, that's great. I'm just wondering about the cost recovery side, but we'll see how that goes. That's all good.
And I think they'll be pleasantly surprised at how low the cost actually is.
But John's section, I support this, but the issue is, because you said you can land over property,
Last man standing.
is that right?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know that it is right.
So, no, that's what I'm saying. Yes, that's a question.
So the issue is, as John said, if someone says, I'm not interested in fibre, I'm not hooking up, and I'm not paying the bill, then what? And who takes the bill up? So what I'm saying is not the ratepayer. So that's what happened. So for me, it's got like the water supply tariff ticket, you're all in, or no one's in. But I see this as the same. So we listen to the community, you've got it, so you're all paying. But I don't know what happens, the very question John raised, if 20 people say, I'm not paying my $800, who then pays that bill?
Comes down to last man standing now.
Correct.
But just a question there, Lord.
Can we defer that discussion for a broader discussion around that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pick it up a bit later?
Yeah. So I'll move the resolution.
Okay. Thank you. Second? Oh, Martin, are you seconding? Oh, thank you. I'm not, so sometimes I'm not sure. Okay, have we ever seconded? All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. And we'll tag that for further discussion on those fiscal implications. So, good point there, John. So it's all about the money.
Always.
Right, now we're on to the payments and reserves, 4.1. 4.1. Thanks, Rhonda.
Page 190.
Reserve service contract, receives, approves option A, and there's 4. So, do you want to raise anything, Bruce and Karen?
Well, there's really obviously two options on the table. The first option gives us the opportunity to feed the LTP with real and realistic rates. However, that option then has a risk associated with it whereby if the incumbent contractor does not get the contract, they may lose staff as the period proceeds to the end of the contract. The other option keeps them live and hungry, so to speak, but it doesn't allow us to feed into the LTP. So that's the real issue there.
So you're...
The preferred option is option A, that allows the LTP to be fed with
Are you happy with that?
Yeah,
Yes.
makes sense, doesn't it, to have actual figures, gosh.
I think it's a resolution.
I'll second it.
Tony moved, seconded John Terry.
So just a question. Derek, in your report, you speak quite well of the current provider. So overall, you've been pretty satisfied with their performance?
Yes, they're not perfect, but they're pretty satisfactory.
Okay.
Sorry, just give me a little sidebar. Any other questions or comment to Bruce and Derek? Gary?
No, it's all right, thanks.
Okay, then I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you very much indeed. So we're on to the next one for Bruce and Derek. That's the
I'll move this resolution.
moved Tony, seconded Murray. Any discussion? There being none, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Oh, I told you, we're swinging. Look, I'm going to skip 4.4 for the minute and move to 4.5.
Have you done 4.3?
I thought we'd just done that.
No,
we're doing
I'll move it to Tony second. That's what we're around as well.
Okay, 4.3.
I'll move it to Tony second, we swapped around.
Oh, Murray this time, then seconded
Yeah.
Tony.
Can we just make sure that we are actually approving those, not recommending?
We're approving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 4.3, everybody happy with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Reserves, classification.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Now, we're going to skip 4.4 and go to 4.5, which is the Longreach Road name.
I'll move the resolution.
Move Tony,
Second it.
seconded John. Any discussion?
Oh, it's not going to get to it.
There being none, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Now, what we got, so we put 4.5 into.
See these through,
Yeah.
and then we'll go back to 4.3.
Let's go back to, what we're going to do is we're going to go from 5.1 to 6.1, and then we'll do 4.5, just before we slide into public excluded. Now, the reason for that is we've received some information, but it is not allowed to be public information yet. It will be, but I understand that's at a later time. So we can't discuss it in open forum, even though it's going to be public.
So what we've just received is a legal opinion from Simpson Grayson. That to protect your legal privilege, that can only be discussed in public excluded. However, you can have a discussion about that item if we're not going to refer directly to the legal advice. But if we're going to talk about the legal advice, we would need to move into public exclude.
And it would make sense that with the information that we would discuss it.
Yeah, okay, so we didn't want to go on public excluded, but we were a bit cuckolded by the embargoed information, but,
Well, again, there was no need to be a public excluded because we hadn't received the legal advice. We've been waiting for it for a few weeks, but it's only
We
just
promised it.
literally arrived an hour ago.
Okay, so we're moving on to the next item, 5.1, out of cycle budget approvals on page 216.
I move that we accept it.
Is that Robin?
I'll second.
Second Sally? All those in favour, please, oh no, any discussion?
Seems good.
Right, all those in favour, please say aye.
Yeah,
Against, carried.
Thanks, Erin.
You've got it, guys.
Okay, item 5.2 on page 218. This is the statement of intent, the Waikato Local Authority Shared Services and Local Government Funding Agency. Do I have a mover?
I'll move to receive this.
Move received, Tony. Do I have a seconder for, seconded Martin? Right, move Tony, seconded Martin. Actually, we're only receiving information. Yeah, so you're moving both, aren't you?
Yes.
yeah.
Okay, I thought you said you're only moving one. Okay, any discussion? Terry?
Yes, is this to Donna, is it true? Okay. So I read this again after the last one. I wasn't very happy about some of their goals and objectives. They seem to have strengthened them up a lot more. There is a funding impact on this, 180 something. Is that right?
You'll need to point me to exactly what part you're referring to. Are you talking about WLAS or the Local Government Funding Agency?
The LAS, WLAS.
I thought it was neutral.
Yeah, what, could you just?
Looking at it, just looking down in the, I was just going to find this. Keep going through this.
You're looking at the reduction in chambers on page 230.
What number?
On 230, you look at 184.
Yeah. Yeah, the 184. Am I in the right thing? The LAS, is that the LAS? Yeah.
Right.
So is that money they're looking for?
No.
There's a reduction.
There's a reduction.
It's a reduction. No savings. Oh, that's right, there's savings there, that's right, yeah. Okay, well, I was just more impressed with their objectives and goals as opposed to last time, so,
They would have received feedback from all the participating councils. It was in draft last time, and that was the council's chances to respond back. So they will make changes based on that feedback.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions of Donna in relation to this item? There being none, Gary? Okay, I'll move the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. So now we're on to 5.3, the interim financial operating results on page 256. Thank you, Bruce.
So I'll take the report as read. I have put it in my summary, but I just want to remind everybody that these are interim results.
Yeah.
So they could change. Don't bank on what we see here as being what's going to be in the annual report. There's still a lot of, finance has still got a lot of work to do. Doing all the appropriations and different bits and pieces and journals and stuff to complete the year-end process, which may change these results.
I thought the explanation was very good.
Yeah, so do you expect that change to be outside the $200,000 bump that you got there? You think it's be within the scope of what's here?
Well, as I said in this report, these are interim results.
Yeah.
It could go up or down depending on the appropriations that comes through, the actual final, because these are also based on accruals at month end, whereas by the time we do the final results through, we have had just about all the invoices through for year end. We have hardly any accruals, so that changes the results. So these results are as good really as the accruals that were provided.
But have you got a gauge on what you think it's going to happen?
Well, if you look at the summary note just above the resolution,
Yeah.
I mean, there's a heck of a lot that's got to take into account.
I accept that. I just want to get a gauge on these figures, how accurate they are. You're saying there's a gap? Is the gap big or small?
I'm confident
We are
that
feeling
this,
confident.
I'm confident,
Yes, you
but
shouldn't ask a CFO that question because you will
But
always
I'll-
get the overconsumption.
I would never say, yeah, they will move. I'm confident they
Accept
will
they'll
move.
move, yeah.
Yeah.
Good on you. Well done,
That's
Donna.
why you don't know.
So,
But there's no Titanic.
You're not talking
Oh, sorry, no ice cream.
No, can I have a mover? Murray?
Can I just ask a question?
Oh, sorry, yes.
Just going through these, and we've spent quite a lot of time on solid waste and roading and wastewater and all the rest of it. But building control, there seems to be gone out of it. What's the reason for that too? Am I reading correctly?
Yeah.
So that building control figure that you're looking at, that's a variance to the annual plan, not to the budget revision.
Oh, okay.
So it will be, remember in March, we did a reforecast based on COVID. We had the two scenarios, and then we went with the 8-week scenario. So that's what these March reforecast figures are, and that's what we were working towards for year end. The stuff that's related to the variances to the annual plan, we've discussed those in detail at other times in regards to the actual year end.
Okay, excellent. Do I have a mover?
I'll move.
Thank you, Tony. Do I have a seconder? Sally, all those in favour, please say aye.
I'm just really appreciating the information and acknowledging the timeliness, even though it's not finished yet. It feels, thank you. Yeah, I can't come up with the word, but
From my perspective, the team has worked so hard during COVID and after COVID to get information together and piece it all together, because COVID's been such a bizarre experience, and we've seen the ripple effect right around New Zealand, particularly in the metropolitan. So we have worked really hard to get a handle on things as soon as we possibly can, so that we're not falling down a deep hole down the track. So, whilst there is still work to do, it was important to get these figures out and exposed as early as possible.
so thank you, and your team.
You're welcome.
So thank you, Sally, and we'll take Sally's recognition as being on behalf of all of the council, to all the team, all the hard work, so thanks, Steve. Okay, so we're now moving to members' reports. Murray?
Just a couple of things I want to comment. Under, I don't know whether the record's going to comment, but I'll comment on. Under her able chairmanship, we've had meetings with the supermarkets, both supermarkets were there, saying we want to look at our rubbish streams and doing that, and I think we'll go on to move to some public meetings. So I think that's a good, positive thing we've done. So, and then the other thing I just want to comment on, the last Friday night of the school holidays, we had a night market up there. Probably 2,000 people in town, best estimate. I think it was absolutely fantastic. They're doing that pretty well every school holidays.
Lots of music? Lots of music?
Yeah, there was music, food. Well, we went down 5:30. I thought we might get something to eat down there. You couldn't get anything to eat, it was just chocolate, they all sold out. It was fantastic. I was in town. And there was a couple of lots of music playing. It was really good, wasn't it?
Oh, you want the lobbies?
Absolutely fantastic.
The town centre has become almost a destination now. It's really working now. And people are coming out down the town on those nights. It's brilliant. It is absolutely brilliant.
Well, so James is next. Tony?
You're going to get the
Okay, so I mentioned earlier, we had it wasn't really a public meeting, but it was a meeting called by some concerned citizens at home with coastal erosion. And so I've mentioned that, and I've spoken to Bruce since, and we haven't met the new coastal man, but for those areas that have critical issues in front of them, I think very important that we stick a line on that ground to say what do we do when the erosion reaches that point and other stuff around that. So I think everyone realises it's a very complex matter and it's a very, very expensive matter and it does need care. And I just put on the thing, the feedback we get, shoreline management plan, fantastic project, but can't hold everything else up because we're doing that.
But that's not what's holding up your erosion control.
Well, part of it is because when you then go and talk to an authority that will have to help consent or do whatever you do, sort of saying this work's going on in the meantime, so let's wait till we get the full answer and work out where the priorities are where we're going to invest in our coastal defences. Again, picking up from Murray with the Business Association, oh no, sorry. So that Friday night was fantastic and the Business Association meeting last week. So I commend the Business Association home because I think one of the better submissions to the annual plan came from that association. There was well over 100 people, probably like more 120 people that night. And the vibe was very, very positive. And when you talk about business in town, post-COVID, but even partly during, that are 300% up. Now that is partly because the town's upgraded and it's a pretty pleasant place to go. But like Murray, I thought I'd go down there at 4:30, I'd get there early, I'd go to a few beers and have a think about life. I couldn't park anywhere, it's like, it was fantastic. So, and people did, they just sold out. And the biggest day, like one place that a few of us frequent quite often, they sold everything they could make. And they were queued probably 100 yards down the road trying to get to this place. So, commend the guys at Business Association for what they're doing. And they raised the issue, and I know Thames raised it too, so you go to events, what it costs to look after the street management. Now, once upon a time, you went to a social group like the Lions or someone, who probably like the cop there too, who went and put the cones out, and they knew everybody, and if you're driving a scenario, so you have to turn around and go away, or shit or something comes up through, or whatever. I don't know if there's any merit in us finding some people who can go and do this SMT course, or whatever it is. Like, you don't have to be Einstein to do it, I don't think. And then maybe that person could corral the volunteers to look after that, because this outfit's talking about doing this maybe 5 or 6 times a year. And if every time it costs you 4,000, so the Business Association, they all pay to have this thing going on, and the stall holders pay. And at the end of it, you might as well have done nothing, because a few people benefited because of something that we are put up. So I'd like to see us look at how do we get around some of this compliance, and we just don't nod our heads because someone told us that person had to do it. I was at the Waikato Regional Transport Committee meeting last Friday. Not much out, it was really a process meeting, and I don't think enough to be worthwhile writing a report for you. And I raised with Rob a concern in our own communities. We've talked about a few things that are coming our way with our fees and charges. I do not think that we have enough time to address it. So if I take harbours, we've been on that for 10 years. I still think we'll get the long-term plan time and we'll have the work done. And I think another one for B&Bs, we've got to find every possible way that we can generate revenue, because we have 30,000 people to run this district, and it ain't enough to meet the demands that people have. So Rob, I'd say from my part, I think the organisation's under pressure to provide this information for us to make decisions come the end of the year and early next year. But I'd say I would, and I know I won't speak for Murray, but I will, but we're very disappointed that harbours aren't addressed after 10 years trying to get it addressed. And again, with what Reka had to say about the waste. So that was bloody encouraging. There are actually a lot of people doing a lot of stuff in that space already when you actually start to talk to them. So I don't know, Countdown don't get anything in our landfill. Everything goes back to Auckland. Someone else's problem. But in the new world, they've definitely got a lot of innovation, but there's a lot more to be done. And I sort of, every time I hear Coromandel plastic free, I wish we'd got to that before you did, because Murray's been talking about it for years. But we have to go that way. And So everyone's in that waste place at the moment, well done.
The only comment I'd make in there is that firstly, big ups to the Mercury Bay Business Association. They did an outstanding job during COVID and always have done a pretty good job actually. I've been quite impressed with them. And the second thing I'll mention is that throughout the district there are grumblings around the increased cost of rubbish bags. But I just think that gives them an incentive to start thinking about how they can reduce it and make it last longer. Martin?
Don't pick on it, erase it, but I keep saying it's not the cost of the rubbish bag. Our comms and everyone even talks on the subject, it isn't the cost of the bag, the cost of the bloody bag's 10 cents.
Yeah, we know, we've had this.
Well, tell them it's about picking it up and getting rid of it. And if you don't want it, don't buy a bag and take your own stuff there and you'll save.
They can choose how full they want to fill it and over what time frame. So they can make the saving, make the bag last longer if they so chose. Martin?
Yeah, so just following on from the solid waste that Tony's been talking about, I was really encouraged during the workshop that we had the other week around solid waste, and there does seem to me to be an appetite for some change. And as everyone else has said, if we just keep trying to do the same thing, it's clearly not working out. So I was really encouraged about the response to Mark Creasley.
Mark Creasley.
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 Mark.
Creasley.
So to his comment, and I think we do need to be considering all options. I don't think we should be taking options off the table just because
Sorry, Martin.
Several of us went to the Thames Business Association AGM last week. Rob spoke there, and the feeling that we got from that is that it seems to be a lot more focused, and that's, I think, in large part down to Rob and the various meetings that Stratton, Peter Rebel and had with the new management of the Thames Business Association, so that's quite encouraging. And yes, the other thing, also something that Tony touched on, was around costs for events, especially the traffic management. And I know in Thames, I think closed the main Holland Street's around 6,000 or 7,000, and that's a huge amount out of a budget for an event. So I don't quite know if we can get ourselves trained up and stand out there in high vis, and I don't think we can get around compliance, but we do need to be thinking if we've got funding for event, then we need to be saying, well, okay, to have this event, part of that's traffic management, and we need to be making sure that that's factored in. So that's all I've got.
Sally?
Good to be here. I think that I just want to acknowledge that I feel really positive about the way that we as a governance group and we as a whole team are working together and pulling together. So want to encourage that, and a sense of huge changes through COVID and that, and how you and the opportunities of that rather than the challenges, without being Pollyannish about it. I think we're well placed, and how do we maximise the opportunities and the ability to do things differently, quickly. That's all I want to say.
Thank you. Robin?
Okay, a number of things. I was on holiday in the first week of the school holidays, and we went down to quite a large number of small towns, sort of progressively from here to Wellington. And I was thinking about innovating streets here in Thames, and thinking about the identity of the place that we live. I was watching with a critical eye how the other towns have done it, and I was some specific things I'll be feeding back into that process. But I thought, the one thing that we don't seem to have here, which I think is a good thing actually, was a gimmick. In terms of, you go to Ekatahuna, lovely town, fantastic place, lots of Kiwis everywhere. and, you know, Napier was beautiful and it had lots of street art and it just, I walked into Napier thinking, this place is, I didn't actually Napier, I drove to Napier and then, you know, and it's really lovely and everybody seems to be connected into a big vision of what the town should be, if you know what I mean. So lots of people, not just one golden statue, but a whole lot of street art that sort of encompasses what they feel of the town. So that's useless, but I brought it to you anyway. You know, I've also gone to a couple of AGMs and I attended the Thames Spatial Planning Day that Michael Jones put together. And I would like us all to collectively come up with a different name for the group of people who seem to be missing from the society. We talk about 25 or 45-year-olds. You refer to us as the wedge. Can we get a different name, please? I don't want to be in the wedge. So, but I think that
Mini birds.
you like the up and comers. I don't know. Just a thing in terms of language, and you know, it doesn't. There was lots of talk at the Thames Business Association AGM of the wedge, and I counted, and there were about 5 of us, and there were a group of about 50, and I thought, okay, so we are rare and special, but I think we mustn't. Yes, it's really great to talk about these people who are missing, but we mustn't forget the people who are here. So that's the people who are over 45. There are lots of you, and then also the people who are, you know, under 25. You know, we need to be thinking about the teenagers. We need to be thinking about the old people when we discuss council business. So yes, we're cool, but don't talk about us to the exclusion of the people who actually are here.
But the danger that we've got is that we keep gearing for that rather than creating an environment for that younger generation to come through, and that really concerns me. John?
Yeah.
No, I think it's just tickety boo with me, I'll pass on to someone.
Well, I'm just raising the same issues of traffic management. It certainly is an issue, and I don't know how we need to address it, but we need to do. I remember getting this email from Diane Connors, and it was 4,485 for road closure and 750 for a traffic management plan. So it just eats into the project. I mean, people trying to put together for nothing, it kills the job really. At any rate, saying that, Whangatar's got a street party. That's sort of what happened in, I think, Mercury Bay did the same thing, and it was very successful. So they've got one planned for the 5th of September. Closed off the roundabout. Got the bus there, got people coming out and put your goods out in the street and have a party.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Not night time though.
No. And Tyrell Paranui, Corey Park, the skate park, we met with some lobby groups and we're back to the drawing board. Nothing more about that. And Royal Billy Point, there's a bit of drama over there about getting the job finished, but I've spoken to Bruce and we're working on that, so that's me.
Excellent. I'd just like to endorse what Sally said about everybody working really well together. It plays a... Yeah. Gary, Gary. Yeah, no, I nearly...
I've been hovering away in the background.
I'll stop right there and ask if you'd like to provide a members report.
Oh, just trying to chill out a bit and not be quite as frenetic in my life.
Good on you.
That's what Sanford's do, isn't it? Good on you, Gary. So I'll now go back to just endorsing what Sally was saying about everybody working so well together, and I think that's really important. I think it's also important though that we can have those, when people have a concern, they can raise them, such as John and I and Martin have done, and voiced our view, and done that in a way that you felt comfortable being able to do it.
Yes.
And I think that's really important, because if you have a concern, you can express that concern, but it doesn't mean you don't necessarily support the fundamental principle of what's trying to be being achieved. And the road closure compliance, yes, so I did reply back to Diane. I actually saw her yesterday and had a bit of a chat about that. It's a huge cost, and I agree with Tony. I think we need to look at the regulations and see what we can do to, not get around them, but make some templates which are box ticking templates that don't cost an arm and a leg. we need to just identify where the costs are and see how we can get over that cost while we're doing the compliance. Can I just, while I'm talking about the road closure stuff, what happened to that trailer that Thames Community Board had with all the traffic management?
I'm not sure,
equipment on
because
board?
that's why, Diane Connors had the certificate and I've been her volunteer some years ago. So, but
Well,
I
I
think,
understand it got sold because nobody would use it. That was a whole complement of,
So through the chair, I'm pretty sure that got sold. It was sitting around for years, not being used at all. So I'm hearing the discussion around traffic management, and I'm sympathetic to groups that are trying to organise events, and then there's a large cost of traffic management. It's really unfortunate that this stuff is legislated, and it's really hard to not do it and to bring the cost down. So you might have to bring the cost down a little bit, but the reality is that a large part of those costs are required. There's no way you can get around that. So we have looked at the organisation. That trailer was purchased a number of years ago, probably 7 or 8 years ago. They got a little group together that were going to do all that stuff. They did 1 or 2 events and realised that it was way too hard, and they were actually taking on all the risk themselves doing that stuff, and basically just never have it again. So those groups going to this little group of people that they arranged, trying to bring new people in. Every time they go to them, they say, we're not interested. We've done it a couple of times. It's actually way more work than what we realised, and we don't take more of that risk, and so it all just kind of fell over. So that trailer sat with a whole load of signs and stuff for 5 or 6 years at least, doing nothing. So
and so it was owned by the Thames Community Board. And so my other question would be, how did Beachcroft get on? Because, or do they not do road closures the same anymore?
no, they do road closures, so they just get on their game and they do it. They have a pile of volunteers.
Yeah. Yeah, and then well resourced with equipment.
I'll double check on that trailer.
I was going to say, the cost of having to put a traffic management plan in. So it should be a template. At the end of the day, if you come to Whitianga, there is only one street that is basically shut down, which is the main street, Albert Street, and Lee Street, and Hammond. So it's always the same place that's closed down.
You should be able to cut and paste.
So if you've done it once, I should say, it doesn't matter what event you run. So if you take the classic cars and that meet once a month at home, they don't do any of that. They just all turn up, park the cars and get on with it. But it doesn't matter what town, like every town we've got, you can hit a 9 line from one end to the other. So there should just be a template that you're going to have an event, and that's that. So that's the first $750 that you don't pay for. The rest of it, no one ever got run over when the lines ran. So I just go back to how we did it. Get one volunteer or one councillor or one staff member to go and do the course to coordinate it. Because you take the Scott Festival and things like that, these are just, like there's hundreds of volunteers involved, and you've got this other money you pay out where nothing happened for the entire history of running those events. So we need to, I appreciate the legislation, but we need to push back on some of the stuff because it's just.
So my suggestion is that we look at the regulations around it.
Yep.
We see where we can make some really positive, proactive suggestions to the minister.
Yep, agreed.
And we push that through our regional transport committee.
Well, I don't think it's that.
Well, it's a roading issue, so it has to be.
No, it's health and safety, but not the road.
Yeah, but it's on your roading space, so it comes into the roading.
we can't mitigate it now, so.
No, we
somebody
can't.
needs-
Can I just help you here?
Yeah.
I'll just get this, so there's 2 different aspects. The first one is, we're incorrect when we say nothing used to happen in the past, but what used to happen in the past, because we've got this legislation now, is that somebody got killed or somebody broke a leg or whatever it is, there is history that creates this legislation or this bureaucratic environment. It doesn't mean that it's run of the mill, it doesn't happen all the time, but I can think of events where cyclists have been killed for lack of good traffic management. So you have all of this very, very robust legislative environment that people need to meet. The best response to that is to pick where our key venues are going to be. Now, if that is the main street of Whitianga and the main street of Pollen Street, the main section of Pollen Street in Grahamstown, make it a venue in terms of when somebody wants to do an activity on a street, it is a venue, and you have the standard traffic management plans that will be applied every time there's an event there, so that we're not redoing all of that work. It is templated. So I think there's big merit in making sure that we pick a place. If somebody wants to have an event outside of that place for whatever reason, then they need to bear the cost of it. But providing it works for 80% of the community, you're hopefully cutting the cost of that compliance to a certain degree. The other aspect is obviously the risk, the compliance cost risk. If you hand it to a Lions Club to undertake the placing of the cones and the waving of the arms, they are taking on the liability. And many, many clubs have given up the ghost when it comes to taking on that responsibility, because nobody wants to take responsibility if somebody has a car crash, or if worse still, somebody were to get knocked off their bike and killed. So understand where everyone's going, and I think everybody really gets it. I'll get the team to identify where the key street events have been in the last few years, to see if there's an opportunity to create an event environment where we can template things to see how much we can reduce those costs by. We won't spend a lot of time doing that. We'll just do a quick and dirty to start with, to give you guys an idea of where there might be the opportunity to save costs if we then want to pursue it. Does that sound fair enough?
Yeah, that sounds great.
It's a start.
Yeah. So Rob, where's the money go? Where's the money go? Like the $4,000 for the road closure, who gets that money?
Well, there's a range of people. So you've got to pay the person that's got the qualifications to assess that plan. You've got to pay to get the plan done if you need someone to do it for you.
Well, that's on top of that. There's another 70
the time to do all the work on site, so you get paid the people to get out and about and do all that.
So,
you got paid to hire all the cones and signs if you don't have your own. So the other thing I would say is that if there's big groups like Scott Festival, they've got hundreds of volunteers or whatever, there's nothing stopping them from doing that, as long as they go through the right procedures. They've got the person that does have the qualifications. You can then use volunteers. I'm not saying you can't use volunteers. So there's nothing stopping people trying to come up with ways of reducing their costs of doing traffic management, but it is a challenging space to.
So if they front with a lot of volunteers, that price goes down.
It'll go down. They'll cut their costs down, but there's always going to be a level of cost that you do have to incur to make.
That sounds like a lot of copy pasting like stuff up front, doesn't it? It's a regular. But
yeah, I think what Rob's talking about, that stuff up front where it is red leader, then like talking to Lorna and her events team, there's 4 streets in the district which are the main streets in the big, the main towns. So let's concentrate on those and see if we can do some templates and see if we can reduce the cost.
So we have a template which identifies the stream of costs and then identifies some actions you can take to reduce the costs. So then the organiser can choose to undertake some of those additional actions by getting volunteers, etc., to incentivise that reduction of expenditure. So just a simple one-pager, hopefully, maybe 2, just to identify that as a way of being more proactive about it, and even then still looking at the regulations to see if there aren't some recommendations that could be made to the respective minister.
Yeah, I think we would have to be careful though, because like Bruce says, if the community group, the Lions, takes on liability.
No, it could be the person who's qualified to take the liability of liability insurance and then brings those.
Let's just go.
Yeah, okay, so we'll leave it at that. I think I'm grateful to Rob and staff for doing a little bit of work in that space. If we could, that would be great. If we could make a little bit of headway, sometimes getting volunteers is a trick. So thank you very much, everybody. Do I have a mover for the members' reports? Terry, seconded. Murray, all those in favour, please are.
Aye.
Yes, carried. Right, we're now going into public excluded.
You don't need to yet unless you want to talk about the legal advice specifically.
Hang on, Bill, we aren't quite going in unless we want to talk about this legal advice specifically.
So we're now on to item 4.4, which is the Three Waters report. So yes, the Mayor is right. If you want to talk about the legal advice that has just arrived, and maintain privilege, you'll need to move into public excluded. However, the legal advice wasn't available when the report was written, and it may well be that the bulk of the conversation, maybe all of the conversation, can occur in the public part of the meeting. So my suggestion would be that we start the conversation, and if you want to narrow down onto the legal advice, which is a small component, then you would move into public excluded at that time. That would be my suggestion.
The reason I would reinforce that for Steve is that this is a very important issue for the public to be aware of.
Yep.
So I recommend that the conversation is at least started in public, so that everybody gets the idea of what is being discussed between Wellington and the rest of New Zealand.
Okay.
But my only, so looking at the resolution, I'm actually absolutely fine with it. My only thing is in relation to item resolution 3, it says authorise the chief executive to execute on behalf of council the memorandum of understanding associated blah blah blah. I'll pay to execute tranche 1. And that before you enter into tranche 2, it comes back to a decision of council.
Yeah, that makes sense to me too. That was what we discussed.
That was definitely the intention.
Yeah.
I just put in there after execute tranche 1.
Yeah.
I mean, the government has publicly stated that it's non-binding. They've publicly stated that. I now have, Rob, did you want to? It's been an interesting time. We all trotted off to Hamilton for a briefing, which was almost a complete waste of time because it was no different to what was in the paperwork. And they undertook to send us the legal opinion straight away. So we only got it at the beginning of today's meeting. And then there's been all sorts of uppy-downy stuff. Rob, did you want to?
Well, again, at that workshop, which was close to 2 weeks ago now, we were told the next day, or sorry, the Monday afterwards, that was the Friday, so the week last Monday, we were going to get notice of what our allocation of funding would be under tranche 1. We're still waiting to hear what that tranche of funding is going to be. I found out this morning, I haven't fact-checked this, so this may not be actually true, but I'm told that 50% of the funding for any TLA will be subject to a regional decision of the TLAs in that region that have decided to uptake tranche 1 funding. So I'm assuming that they're using that dynamic as a way of making sure that all the money goes to those who use it, and those that don't sign up for tranche 1 won't get any money.
Yeah.
But they want to make 50% of that money a discussion on a regional basis, which seems quite bizarre.
Between all the TLAs.
So the discussion around the table seems to be at the moment that we would stick with whatever formula has been used to give us our first 50% of funding, just stick with the formula to give us the second 50% of funding, and don't overcomplicate it by coming up with a regional project to do whatever. Again, I lack clarity in that space because it changes on a sort of a daily basis. You never really know quite where this is going, but the only advice that
But hang on, the other part of that is that if you had already applied for funding for any of the Three Waters infrastructure under any other government grant, that comes off your monies that can be calculated for tranche 1, as I understood it.
That's what I said.
So like PGF and stuff like
Is
that.
it? So it's a little bit messy at this stage, but
however messy it is,
yeah,
it's still that we want to be at the table rather than out. So
once there is no obligation placed on councils and there is money on offer without co-funding, it's better to be in and consider what we're going to do than to refuse to join because we don't know what's coming up. So,
Steve?
I'm happy after the questions. I'll just share some observations.
Yes. So, Rob, how are our relationship with our group? Do they feel connected to do this together?
confused.
Everyone's confused.
And the CCO, is they're changing to a new abbreviation, and what that new abbreviation was?
It's not going to be a CCO and it's not going to be a Crown entity.
No.
So it will be something in between, which we could term an SPV, a special purpose vehicle. It will be a creation of legislation.
Right.
That creation of legislation, we will probably see the legislation written in the next 10 months because they're anticipating that the legislation will be passed by 2022 for those special purpose vehicles.
So it could be something like a construct like NZTA, for example. John, did you?
So when Christmas comes and we get all this money, Rob, I was just looking at page 206. I mean, I think we've got to begin over. And do we actually have to use this money that's been given to us to support new projects and job creation? We can't go and fix the leaky tap on the Whitianga Reservoir with this money. We've got to actually whole new project. Is that why?
That's the suggestion in the information at the moment. Yes, it's about job creation.
And shovel ready.
And shovel ready. And yeah, so not business as usual, nothing that's in our annual plan or something. It's a new project, shovel ready. Yeah, okay.
It's a moot point.
It's a moot point?
It's confusing.
Yeah, I'd love to know.
But it'll have to be at the annual plan, because it's only 50%, so if you're going to invest
Here, we'll talk to you soon.
5, 10, 20, 30, 80 million, you've got to know that.
I'll stay quiet.
Yeah, we'll leave it.
I haven't got any specific answers for you. I've got lots of ideas, but not appropriate at this point.
Okay.
Okay.
If you want, you can ask questions later. Murray.
Rob, one of our big problems we have here is the influx of visitors. Is there any thoughts of, can we make a case with our visitors and the pressure on, or are they just taking the standard population? Because we've always moved out.
We've been flatly refused in the questioning that we've had at both the workshops and workshops with staff as well. We've asked that question, is there going to be any consideration of visitor destinations, and that's Queenstown, Taipo and Thames-Coromandel in particular? No.
Population based.
It is. They should be doing it on a rating base, on a rating of properties, not on a population that happens to be in the district at one time in a 5-year period.
So that always disadvantages us and a number of other councils as well. Gary, did you have any questions you wanted to ask?
Put his mute on.
You're on mute, Gary.
Unmute. Do you want to unmute? Unmute, please. We can't hear you, even though he is unmuted.
You can now,
Oh,
unfortunately.
we got you. We got you.
Yeah, I just had to pop out quickly for something. We're still talking about 4.4?
Yes.
The three waters, yes, the memorandum of us.
Yeah, well, I have a bit of an insight into this, as Stephen will tell you. I've looked at what information there is, and I'm comfortable with it.
Thank you. Oh, that's great. Okay, so everybody.
Could I perhaps just share 2 observations? Well, 3 actually. One is that I agree that the opportunity for tranche 1 seems good, and there is, you know, if there's money on the table, we should gratefully accept it. And then on page 209, you can kind of see the program of work. For me, it's much better in A3. So that's probably an important document, and a lot of that information is available on the DIA website. And then there are 2 sort of larger conversations which will need to occur at some point when further decisions are made. The first one relates to the long-term plan. So at the moment, there is not an elegant connection in terms of timing for the long-term plan. So the advice is assume that there is no change for your LTP. It is likely to be in the next LTP that there will need to be an adjustment. And then the second question is, in considering that next LTP, if you are starting to consider council as a business, what will it look like when this change, which we don't actually know exactly what it is, what will it look like? So it is definitely evolving, and the moment that you commit something to paper, it's incorrect. But those are just sort of some, that's the decision we've got right now. But if you pull up, that there are some larger conversations to be had around this table, and that's why I thought it's really important to have, you know, these conversations in the public domain.
Would it be useful to members if we got Steve to do A3s for us all of this grid? Would you like an A3 copy? Because it is easier to read an A3.
Yeah, A3 is really.
Okay, Steve.
I can get that done by lunchtime.
If you could, that'd be great. Mary, your question?
So this,
Thank you.
so the government, assuming the government gets back, it's still looking at 5 companies in 2022, they'll get legislation then.
No,
The official line is that they're open-minded on the number of companies, that they want it to be an opt-in, opt-out basis for local authorities. However, we have it on reasonable authority that they have always been looking at 5 water companies for New Zealand. So we're trapped in between reality and conjecture in that regard, because we're still driving this, we want local authorities to make the decisions basis, and that's a no man's land from a local government perspective. However, the legislation in 2022, if I'm memorising that table correctly, is when the entities will be created. They want them to be operational by 2023, July 1st, 2023.
That's ridiculous.
Again, I'm just saying what the facts of this process as described to us at this moment in time. That means that it is part of this current LTP document that we are going into. So we've very much raised the point with them that we're doing an LTP this year for implementation as of next June. By the second year of that, it will be completely blown out of the water. However, by the first year of that, there will be legislation introduced that means we will need to sign up to tranche 2 or not sign up to tranche 2. We will have to consult with our communities if we are going to sign up to tranche 2, unless there is legislation to say that you do not consult with your communities. So basically what I'm seeing is that this time next year, our discussion will be, are we going to consult, and on what basis are we going to consult with our communities if we're going to sign up to tranche 2, regardless of any other chit-chat, flack, whatever's going around, because there will be an awful lot of it. So those are the key issues for us, is we need to find a way jointly with Wellington to inform our communities properly, to give community enough warning about what is happening, because as local government we are trapped in this no man's land of really not understanding what's out there, really understanding that in many regards it does make sense, but does it make sense for our community, because we don't know enough about it. And I think that's the real difficult aspect to it all.
Now, the one thing the Department of Internal Affairs is absolutely clear about, they have a very clear understanding of the water provision in this district, and it's concern for them because only 40% of the water supplies are articulated council supplies, 60% are community-owned supplies, and so I'm throwing how that's going to work. Murray and Terry.
So I won't take it wrong that in theory, because I think it is going to be theory, with the way government's going, our 9 urban water supplies could be taken out of council and into a company by June 2023.
And
yes.
7 rural.
Along with all of the assets and all of the debt.
So
I haven't quite worked that out yet.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, I'm just trying to get my head round, and you guys have got to get your head round more, but it's a major.
It would be the biggest change in local government history from my perspective.
Yeah. So we as councillors for investment decisions have got some major rationalisation to do.
Yes.
Well, you can't.
Not at the moment, but coming down the track.
You've got to be careful.
Well, that's what I say, coming down the track.
It's very granular risk register.
And guess what you can be guaranteed of? You can be guaranteed of ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. If they thought 1.98 was bad.
So one of the other parallel discussions is not just water, and this is another strong point that has been made through all of the meetings that we've had with DIA, And that is, if you are genuinely going to legislate for this to happen, which as a nation, if we want this to happen, it needs to be legislated for. So get on and do it. But if you are going to legislate for that, you absolutely at the same time, starting now, need to tell local government, what are you going to do instead? Because the three waters, my pick would be 50 to 70% of what local government in New Zealand does is three waters. It ranges in that envelope for different local authorities. That's a big chunk and a lot of stranded overhead if it's going to be left hanging there without anything to fill the void. So government needs to be very strong from my perspective, and I'm sorry if I'm sounding a bit political here, I'm not trying to be, it's just the things that sit on our risk register. We need to know what local government is going to be tasked with if we are going to make conscious and sensible and good decisions within the three water systems.
So does this give rise to the rumblings going now about another month?
Inevitably.
Yeah.
Yeah, so to Rob or Steve, it's not often the government gives you money up front without some rating impact coming in. How's that all going to work? You don't get money, somebody's got to pay for it. So is the money coming up front and there's no rating impact for us until 2023?
Oh, don't you worry, there'll be a cost impact to every single person on the receiving end of a utility. It'll be horrendous.
Basically, again, and this is only my opinion again, so please forgive me if I'm sounding political. I'm not, I'm trying to be quite factual, but I firmly believe that the creation of these water companies is about the creation of a utility bill, so that we can charge for all the waters as an activity in the same way that we charge for electricity, we charge for mobile phones, we charge for landlines. It's the same type of dynamic. Yeah. So that the creation of that utility bill becomes less of a debate about my taxes are going up. It's more about I have a utility bill and I will pay what I need to pay to get my water, and the same as we do for electricity, so that it removes that let's call it endless deflection between Wellington and councils about my rates or my taxes have gone up. That's the key, because ultimately behind all of this water stuff is a fundamental lack of investment and a fundamental lack of an ability to pay, because we're too small a nation to create first world infrastructure for the numbers of people that need it. So it's the funding gap. That's what we're trying to do.
Too many years of people saving their political ass without putting out the true cost of what they're doing. And so that's been the biggest detriment for New Zealand, getting ahead of the game in terms of its infrastructure and putting us in this position. That's my perspective.
Two questions. So Rob, does that mean universal metering?
That will be, that should be an inevitable consequence. Now, again, don't get me wrong, I believe we've done infrastructure in New Zealand very badly for 100 years. It's about the funding gap. We have to fill that funding gap, but the key question is, how do we fill that?
Okay, so
there's only one source.
My other question goes back to page 209, which is the big sheet that Stephen is going to enlarge with your eyes. But in tranche 1, it said the first thing in that is engage with iwi to establish interest reform program. And certainly when we were on the fly back in March, February, whenever we were there, the AWA came as a very strong thing, to build relationships on or break relationships with. So have we asked as the first step?
Yeah,
we've had that.
I spoke about that at the last council meeting.
No, about this memorandum of understanding, this three waters policy.
We've talked with them about that.
We have.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
And this is a DIA process, so their engagement with iwi has also occurred. And at the meeting that we were at last Friday, there was a strong questioning from the group. Have you done that? Have you got that?
And they said they have.
They said that they had, and perhaps people with iwi were going, "Are you sure?" Double check. So, but do remember, this is a government DIA process of which we can participate or not. So we've got, before the council now is a relatively sensible set of resolutions on that small decision, and this conversation, which is bigger, which we've all just involved ourselves in, is going to continue for the next 2 or 3 years. And I would agree with Rob, that is the biggest reform in local government if it goes through. you know, and it's likely to, but you know, but in what form, we just don't know. So we will keep, as we get information, sharing it, and it will inevitably evolve.
So we're at a point where we can go back to the resolution, because as I read it, that still stands.
Still live,
and
that's still a
consent.
resolution.
So
You've moved it.
I've moved it, yes.
Who seconded it? Murray seconded it, and just with the words tranche 1.
Yep.
Added in. Any further discussion, Gary?
As I say, I've looked at certain other things and I'm very comfortable with it. And after Havelock North, it's going to happen. I'll tell you here and now. It is going to happen. The government's going to, whichever government we have, they're going to have to force it through one way or other.
Great.
Okay, so
what I will say, just before you sign off on this resolution, we also had a commitment from Solgum and DIA that we would have a draft report that would be circulated to all councils so that they were signing off on the same report. We still haven't got that draft report.
Oh, we got it last night, which was a little bit late for publishing this agenda.
Right. So it's not different to ultimately to this resolution, but I just wanted to let you know that there is a national draft report that has been circulated that we haven't had the time, clearly, because it came last night. I wasn't aware that we've got it last night, but what we will do is we will put that draft report somewhere in the 25th, because we've got another council meeting on the 25th.
We've got a workshop there. Yeah.
We'll bring it to that workshop. If necessary, if there are any changes, we'll make sure that we take cognizance of that, because we've got until the 30th of August to officially go back and accept the offer from.
Yeah, but we are technically making the decision and delegating the authority to do that. So it will be with the Mayor and Rob to consider that, but obviously they can have a little bit of a hoo with you on the 25th. And then for administrative convenience, I suggested it was the CEO that was signing it, because one signature is always easier to find than two.
Tony.
I just wonder what part, or how much this we can communicate to the varying communities, and particularly those that have got water concerns at the moment. Whilst there's a lot of people wanting, and you know, all of us in this room saying a patent supply of water, it'd be very unwise to go out and spend what could be hundreds of millions funded by 30,000 people when this is coming down the track. So at the moment, really got to make them, I think we have to make the best of what we can, what we've got, and take the best measures we can to conserve before we start investing, because this thing here is going to be massive, and if we go down the wrong track and decide to go down an investment strategy, and this turns up, we've just put 30,000 ratepayers in a hole.
From my perspective, the only recommendation I can give you, and I'm sort of quite confident in this, is that we should always in local government continue to do what we were going to do. Don't be distracted by what might be, what is coming, what's not coming, because we always need to focus on what are the right decisions for our community at this time, if it's going to happen or if it's not going to happen, because it can very easily go either way in that regard. And we can't afford to get behind the 8 ball, but we can't afford to accelerate things either, because we will get in a... So do what we were planning to do, and make sure that we do it with the best of information that we have about what we are trying to achieve as a district. That's my best advice I can give you at this point in time. And of course, with such a big reform proposal as this, we'll bring it back into the chamber as often as we can, as soon as we get to here.
And we just need to, I totally agree with Rob, we've got to carry on business as usual with caution though. And so we still need to prioritise where the spenders, you know, on greatest need and all that type of thing.
Totally.
So yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that. Right, I think we can put that resolution now. So moved Sally, seconded Murray, no further comment. Then all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you so much, really appreciate that. Thank you, Steve, Rob. Rightio, we'll move into public excluded. Do I have a mover? Sally, seconded.
Just excuse me, will that report be published on the website before the workshop? Or will you follow up?
What report are we talking about, the one that we got last night?
We got last night.
It'll be coming back to council for the 25th, as I understand it. So, I had a mover, Sally, and a seconder, who was the seconder?